Weren't here last Sunday. We are off on a series, bringing hope to the world. And Katie made these great little banners up there for us. And we started last week with talking about the Lord's Prayer that said, your kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. And then we looked at a passage in Colossians that said that Colossians 1:12, that we in fact are God's vehicles of hope. That God has this great plan to bring hope to the world, and we ask the question, okay, how's he going to do it? And then Colossians says, yeah, he's going to do it with you. And you're going to be the ones that are going to take hope to the world. And so we're going to look at some general themes that Christ talked about, and we're going to talk about how they can be connected to some of the ways, some of the vehicles that we can use to bring hope to the world. And last week we talked about salt. And salt is a seasoning. It was also a form of currency at the time of Christ. And so as a form of currency, we talked about how voices are so powerful. They can be so influential, and how you use your voice can be for positive or can be really for in a negative sense. And so the importance of being careful about how you use your voice. Which reminds me of a story. There was a guy driving down through the country in a curvy road, and he was driving along, and his window down, and he was just enjoying the drive. And suddenly around the corner in front of him, a car came clear over into his side of the road, and he had to swerve clear over onto the shoulder. And as the car went by, the guy yelled out, "Pig!" And not to be outdone, he turned back, "Hog!" And then he went around the corner and ran into a pig. So words can be influential. They can change your life and maybe provide you with a barbecue. All right, move right along. So we talked about voices, and then we talked about investing, how there are ways that you can invest in hope. And we talked about some of the things in our world that are going on in which you can invest in. You can certainly invest in this place. The Firewood Ministry is an investment in hope. The fact that we provide facilities for people to have memorial services here, to have recovery groups, thank you. People recovering from addictions. And so there's lots of different ways that we provide hope so you can invest here. But there's also world organizations that are providing water. They're rescuing kids from sex trafficking, like Remember New. So all those different ways that we talked about last week of being salt. So this morning I want to talk about light. And light is introduced in John chapter 1. And let me just read you some of the things that the writer talks about when he talks about light. He talks about the fact of, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made, and about him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and the life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. So before we talk about light, I want to talk a little bit about darkness, because darkness is sort of the opposite of light. And we need to have a little bit of understanding of darkness in order to understand how we sort of invade darkness. When I was in Ecuador, when I was 19 years old, I was walking through a market in Quito, Ecuador, and I saw these two men carrying this contraption. It was a box-like affair, about 3 by 3 and about this high. And they were carried on poles, and above it there's this curtain that went all the way around the box. And they were walking along, and every once in a while they would stop, and people would come up and pay them money, and then they would step behind the curtain. And I didn't know what was going on until one person stepped out, and I saw inside there was the head of a child that was coming up out of the bottom of that box. Now, it seemed to me humanly impossible that a child could fit inside of that area underneath there, but somehow this child was contorted in such a way that the only thing that was coming up out of there was her head. And she was telling people their fortunes. This little child was. And it just was incredibly, horrifically dark and ominous that they were abusing this child in that way and using her for their own fortune. So there are occasions in this world when there is incredible darkness. And I think that it's important for us to understand that as vehicles of light, we're there to dispel the darkness. I had a dream recently that I want to tell you about that I don't know if it was a dream from God or not. I've had some dreams that when I woke up, I knew they were from God. And I said, wow, that was a message from God. I don't know if this one was or not, but it was revealing to me. And this was the dream. We were living at a home that we used to live in Kent, and I had walked in the back door, and Jean was standing in the kitchen, and the whole room was filled with darkness, except where Jean was standing, and there was this column of light around her. And I stepped in the door, and I said, wow, what's this? And she said, I don't know. I don't know what it is. I said, okay. Well, let's try and move it out of this room. And so we just sort of started walking around and moving this darkness. And we sort of just herded it like sheep out of the kitchen into the living room, and we just kept moving it around. And there was this huge wardrobe there, and I opened the doors, and we moved all of the darkness into the wardrobe and closed it. And I woke up and I thought about that, and I thought, wow, that's such an unusual approach to darkness, because we often think of darkness as this abrasive confrontation, like we were standing there with a Bible or something and screaming at darkness. And I started thinking about all of Jesus' encounters with darkness. And as far as I can tell, every time he encountered darkness, he did so in love. It wasn't this angry confrontation. It was this incredible loving power. And he pushed the darkness back, but even in that, it seemed to me exuding from him was his gentleness, was his love, was his kindness. And honestly, I don't know where the source of all darkness comes from. I'm not sure that anybody does. Obviously, the head of all darkness is Satan, and there are enemies under him. But everything below that, there are some parts of it that are really mysterious for me, so I don't understand. So I think that even as we approach darkness, the most powerful weapon that we have in confronting it isn't any kind of a strength or power, but it is love, which actually is the most powerful force on the planet, isn't it? So as you think about it, as you come into situations of darkness, I encourage you to do so with a sense of humility, obviously, but also with a sense of confidence, but confidence not in your spiritual strength, but in the love of Jesus Christ. So how does love work? How does light work? Well, darkness is something which abuses, which covers, which destroys, which hides. And love does all the opposite of those things. Love frees, love reveals, love brings life and encouragement, love brings growth. So let me just talk about a couple ways in which we bring light to the world. The first thing that I thought of as I was thinking about humans as conveyors of light were ways in which we do that through our artistic abilities or through the gifts that God gives us. And, seeing things like this that Katie did, or hearing the guys do their art with the music this morning, or seeing things that people craft, or, wandering through here in the craft bazaar, to me, those are just hopeful. Those are encouraging. Those are things to me that I think bring life to humanity. And that is something which is freeing, it's expanding, it's bringing hope to people. It's hard to be in the midst of all that and have a sense of despair. You have a sense of that there's hope, that there's good things about humanity. So I think that one of the ways that we do that is simply by bringing all those things of our talents and our abilities. Kind of an amusing thing that happens. We have a pastor's retreat that we do every year, and the pastors in this area, a bunch of us get together. We go up in the mountains for a few days, and we mostly just play. Sometimes there's serious discussions, but we try to avoid those for the most part, because some of us have very different ways of viewing ministry. So we basically just play and hang out. But one of the things that is a tradition for us is to play a game called Up and Down the River. It's a silly card game, and it's just hilarious to watch those guys play, because they're pretty competitive, some of them are. And some of the antics, and inevitably we end up just laughing and doesn't laughing feel wonderful? And so just the fact of playing games together and doing silly, fun things is a way in which we build hope into the world. Another area that I was thinking about was the whole area of humor. And, I want you just to dwell on light because there's so many different nuances of it. You can be thinking about it all week long. How do we bring light to our world? But humor, I think, is an important way. I told that ridiculous joke earlier because I think humor is important. Years ago, I had somebody come to me and I told a joke in the service and he said, I don't think a service is an appropriate place for humor. I thought, what? You're going to have a horrible time in heaven. I'm sorry. And how can you read Jesus' life and not see humor in there? I mean, to me, of course, I'm kind of a person that just loves humor. And so I see humor in lots of things that happen in his interactions with the disciples, in Peter sinking into the water, and Jesus pulling him out. And there's just humor all through Jesus' life that I can see. I think he walked around and told jokes all the time, made them laugh. Humor is something which brings so much hope to people. And it is such a powerful thing that we can use. I had a lot of tension in my life growing up, and the way that I dispelled the tension or released the tension was by being the class clown and making jokes, and it got me into a lot of trouble, and sometimes serious trouble, because I would be making smart aleck comments. But I realized now that if those teachers had been wise, they would have understood that the reason I was doing that because I needed a way to dispel all the tension that is built up in me. And if you think about the tension in your life and you come to those places where you've had this incredibly horrific day where your tensions are rising, you're about to explode, there's different ways that you can get rid of that tension. One is to be angry and to be volatile. Another way is to do something that's funny. If you ever are at work and things are just crazy and they're mad and you're about to wring somebody's neck, go in the bathroom, pull out your phone and watch some funny YouTube and force yourself to laugh. Because what's happening in your mind is you're building up all this tension. It's got to come out. And laughter is God's answer for releasing all that tension. Even just smiling. Studies have been shown that if you walk into a very tense situation where people are really angry and you just start smiling, not sarcastically. I mean, there's some ways that you can smile that make people even more mad. But smiling in just a happy way, it dispels the tension in the room. So humor and joy is a way that God uses to bring light and to bring hope. Years ago, I was working with another young man, and we were siting contractors, and we got paid by the job, so we had to really be motivated to work. So the way that we got motivated was to turn on rock and roll music. It was the late 70s, early 80s, and so we had that stuff. We had to have a plug-in radio. We didn't have cell phones, and we had that cranked up really loud, and we would just work to the beat. I mean, we were just flying. But one day, this other couple of guys came on. I don't know what they were doing. They may have been putting the roof on or something. And before we got the radio, we were listening to them, and they were just laughing and giggling and laughing and giggling. And all day long, those guys sat up there on the roof. They'd laugh sometimes so hard, we thought they might come off the roof. But you know what? When we saw them, they were just so relaxed and glowing and happy. And they were enjoying life. And I've never forgot somebody that can go into work and just have so much joy in some menial thing like nailing on roofing. Humor is such a powerful vehicle of hope and smiling and saying kind and wonderful things and bringing inspiration. Be the light of the world. Now, before I conclude with the benediction, I need to acknowledge a little small beacon of light because there's a birthday cake over there today, and I want you all to enjoy Isabel's birthday. And isn't she a beacon of light? Happy birthday, Isabel. So give her a birthday greeting and stand with me, and I'll conclude with the benediction. God of light, God of hope, God of joy, God of happiness, fill us to bursting with that we may take it out into a dark and despairing world where people are grieving and feel hopeless, and when they encounter us, they encounter a spark of hope, a spark of life, a spark of you. Amen.